Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Our first map looks at total precipitation ranks by climate district for the front half of the month of June. And the near record rainfall that's happened down here in parts of Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama, and also here along the coast, has been matched by very, very dry conditions across a broad sector of the United States. Even despite some big storms we've seen over the last week that have come out of the Dakotas and at times cut through the Corn Belt, at least the western half of it here, didn't undo some of the longer-term drought issues that we're dealing with in this area. Also notice the extent of how dry it's been into the Pacific Northwest and our ongoing concerns for California and its dry start to the year just continue. Over the last 14 days, I just wanted to show you this map to bring a couple of things to a point. We saw a lot of scattered storms move through the western Corn Belt, but it did not undo our bigger drought concerns within this entire area, at least here in the near term. It was wettest farther to the south as that cutoff low that came out of Texas took over a week to move through, dumping tremendous amounts of rain in several locations. And that has certainly changed the drought outlook in those areas, but it set them up to be very vulnerable to flooding as we move forward. The west continues to be dry. The Columbia Basin also shows up quite dry here. And with the pattern change we're about to see happening, we have to ask if we're going to be returning moisture to these very dry areas. Because back at the end of May, this is what our soil moisture map looked like. And the shifts around between the high pressure cell that kept hitting the mid-Atlantic, the eastern Corn Belt, and the Northeast, the shift of that to the east, plus the cutoff low that followed it, look at what it did to the soil moisture going from the end of May to the middle of June. Again, this is the end of May through the middle of June. And we've now seen a major shift in the soil moisture values in through this area, really bringing them up. But to the north of that, stretching from the Northeast through parts of Canada and then getting here into the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes, and the Northwest here, the Northern Plains, we still have considerable 16-inch soil moisture deficit. And that's something we're going to watch very carefully. From there, I want to take you to the latest satellite observations, and we'll just go back to sunrise. So this is going backwards, of course. And sunrise this morning, we saw the storms overnight, which put down some big hail in parts of Nebraska, decaying. And this is kind of all the upper level cloud shield that's still moving across parts of Iowa today. And as we move this forward, I'll just draw your attention to one thing I covered in the extended video. That right there is smoke from a large fire in Rockton. So go take a look at that extended video to see what we're doing here. Now, there is still a larger low that is spinning here, and that's going to increase severe weather threat today in parts of the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. And there's still flow coming out of the southwest here that's going to increase our chances of rainfall in the Columbia Basin. But first, I want to talk about what's going on in the low-level flow right here, where we're watching a tropical system, because the National Hurricane Center has now given that a 60% chance of developing into a tropical cyclone over the next 5 days. All right. Tropical Depression 2 is out, so this one's going to be moving in this direction. And there is a wave that just came off of Western Africa, an easterly wave that we're going to monitor throughout this week. But in the near term, it'll be the moisture from this system as it moves to the north that could be a major player going into our upcoming weekend. The European model between the 16th and the 19th is giving this about a 70% chance of developing into a tropical depression. But at this point, that seems to be the limit of its formation here. And let's just take a look at where it possibly is going to go. I'm watching right in through this corridor most carefully. All right, where that moisture spreads through this area will be critical to understanding how much rain we're going to return to parts of the lower Mississippi River Valley through the saturated ground here and between that and the North Atlantic. So let's talk about this. First, we have got risk of stronger storms today in the high plains, along the Gulf Coast, and then here in parts of the mid-Atlantic getting into the Northeast, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, in that area. And that's due to that low that's still here spinning away. So using the 12Z high-res NAM, widely scattered storms stretch from the Great Lakes area here into the Northeast. We're going to watch later today for this boundary to push right in through this area, producing an isolated severe weather threat. So we're going to watch that very carefully. Strong winds, hail, isolated tornadoes are possible. There's a longer frontal boundary stretched here, and we could see coming through parts of Virginia and then North Carolina, South Carolina, but then draped all the way farther into the South and Gulf Coast scattered storms. Florida also gets quite a bit of storms out of this as well, just sea breeze driven here, plus an upper level push of the winds right into that region as well. And as I go into the day on Tuesday morning, do notice that in the Pacific Northwest, right in through there, possibly bringing in some precipitation that gets through Oregon, gets through parts of eastern Washington. And this is an area that has had near record dryness over the last 45 days or so. Now, as that pushes on through Tuesday, what we end up getting here, going all the way out to Wednesday afternoon and evening, is where you start to see the moisture from that tropical system coming through. So let's take a look at this by going to the jet stream level winds first. First thing I want you to know is this wave is not blocked. There's no omega pattern, there's no Rex block, there's no high over low. It's open. And because it is open, it is not going to be there for a long time. Now, while it is here, it's going to pour in the heat to the northern plains through Montana. But what we get is by Tuesday, this wave right here kicks into it. Now, that brings the rains to that area I just showed you in the Pacific Northwest, but it also cuts the top of that ridge off. See it? And the ridge is still anchored over the Four Corner states. But this wave right here, midweek, puts a low just north about Highway 16 in Canada. And then what happens is that particular trough I'm watching right here eventually helps reinforce broader troughing from the Hudson Bay to the Great Lakes. And then the jet stream now does something a bit more like this. Now, underneath this, there will be a temperature gradient, a front in this area. And the big question is, how much precipitation do we get out of that? Because at the same time, this tropical system takes its moisture north. And if the two interact, we could see a lot of rainfall. Beyond that, just taking it out a little farther, the jet stream winds will push up against the Rocky Mountains, increasing rainfall here next week. And a ridge builds out west, which is going to take those temperatures right back up. But through the next 5 days, let's go west to east. Here we have over the next 36 hours the precip possibly getting into some into the Columbia Basin. We then see our tropical system here moving farther into the Gulf of Mexico, but by Friday, we're still looking at the northern extent of it just getting to Louisiana. Today, our system that's moving here toward the northeast and our severe thunderstorm threat. And later on this week, we're going to watch right in through there for a frontal boundary to come through lower Michigan, Wisconsin, northern Iowa, Minnesota. And this is an area that's desperate for rainfall. From there, this is what happens day 5 through 10. If that boundary stalls out and the moisture from this system continues to evac the tropical system to the north, we could see an area in through here that gets a lot of precipitation. It's flooding to the south and over to the mid-Atlantic, given how saturated the soils are. But southern Wisconsin, Iowa, parts of Illinois, and then the eastern Corn Belt could continue to use more rain, as could Nebraska, South Dakota, and this would push up against the Rocky Mountains clear back to parts of Alberta. Now, to show you how this all evolves, I'm going to go to the upper levels of the atmosphere. We're going to do that model comparison again because there's some differences. They both have the big ridge through Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday, and they both attempt to develop this trough that goes right here through the Canadian prairie. But it's that trough that I want you to watch, okay? Because once we get out there to Thursday and into Friday, let's stop at Friday morning, there's a difference. The GFS has got a longer wave. The European has a sharper wave. This would give us more lift in the atmosphere, pushing a front farther to the south in the European. And then as we go on forward into the day on Friday and then eventually into Saturday, you notice that the European, keeps this wave all together, whereas the GFS breaks it up in almost 3 separate waves. This would give us substantially less upper level forcing to produce more precipitation, which means the GFS is likely going to be drier. And this continues into early next week. You see, by Monday, the European dives a deep trough right here into the western Corn Belt. It's got some positive tilt to it. Not so in the GFS. It's broader and weaker, and the flow is not as fast. So that will change up the precipitation pattern into next week as well. And I want to show you what this looks like by now comparing the models. So we've gone through Monday already and into Tuesday and Wednesday. Now at this point, higher pressure builds in both models here across the Corn Belt. And we're going to squeeze most of our thunderstorms right along the Gulf Coast, but it's going to be a dry go of it for most of the United States on Wednesday. But here's that low going through Canada. As we play this through Wednesday into Thursday and now Friday, that both models are attempting to keep lower pressure somewhere in this vicinity. But the difference is in where the tropical moisture is. The GFS farther to the east, the European farther to the north and west. Now watch what happens as the fronts work, well, together in one case and separate from another. I'm now through Saturday afternoon and evening, getting into Sunday morning and midday. Now, both models attempted to lay a front through here, but the GFS was weaker and is therefore not showing much precipitation. It's also got the moisture from the tropical system already over Alabama. What's the European model doing Sunday afternoon? It's developed a low here running along that frontal boundary, which is ultimately connected to this low, and it's taking the tropical moisture and shoving it into it. And the net effect is the GFS has separated these systems, and the European has kept them together. So when we look at all of that put together, this is the difference between the models. The GFS is drier everywhere that you see green compared to the European. European wetter in these colors, GFS wetter in these. So you can see that area is critical. The GFS is wetter on either side, here and here. And it's also wetter farther to the east with the tropical system, whereas the European is wetter to the west. So this model battle is going to play out throughout this entire week. Now from there, I'd like to show you from the European model what the probability is of getting an inch of precipitation between now and the next 10 days. Pause the video and look. Here's the color bar down at the bottom. Probability of getting an inch of rain through the next 10 days. It all depends on that frontal boundary, the low that will develop and run along that frontal boundary, and the moisture from the tropical system as to how much rain we do end up getting. We need to watch these trends carefully. Because by day 10, we start to see the EPO shifting here in the Pacific and a high over low block developing, possibly. That stagnates the flow. It's weak across the United States. We're flanked by ridges. And the net effect of that is to give us this precipitation pattern. It seems with the open Gulf moisture transport, the European model is keeping a large area through the entirety of week 2 with better chances of rainfall. A lot of this coming on that frontal boundary interacting with the tropical system early next week. What's the GFS suggest? Same issues here with the EPO. High over low block, bland flow across the United States. Similar precip anomalies. See this? But it's drier along the Gulf Coast than the European model. But there is some good agreement here. From this point forward, let's talk temperatures, because there are excessive heat watches and warnings across the west and also across parts of the south. And as we look out there over the next 5 days, we're going to be seeing triple-digit heat in Montana through the Intermountain West, and it will build to the west such by the end of this week we'll be seeing 105 to 110 degrees in the Central Valley of California. What happens after that, though, or what happens along with that, is very high evaporation rates. So we will see evaporation rates here along the plains, especially in the high plains and northern plains, getting above 1.5 inches to 2.5 inches this next 7 days. And then that heat's going to move to the west. You can see it right here, where as we get out into that 5 to 10 day time period, the jet stream builds into that weak blocking pattern, heat moves to the west, and a cool down hits this area, which has been extremely hot for the last several days. And that's what we have to be watching out for. That's the pattern shift for the midsection of the country. Now, in my longer extended video, I'm going to discuss a few things. I want you to tune in for that if you're interested. We talk about why June 21st through July 21st still favors warmer conditions in the European, and also why in the European over that same time period, June 21st to July 21st, we tend to be quite wet here with drier risks back to the west. I talk about how the ocean temperatures are changing, and we're going to get into a discussion about the MJO. So check out that extended video, but I'll go ahead and wrap this one up right here. Appreciate your attention. We'll talk to you again on Thursday. Thanks.